Okay, hey, well, welcome back once again. So today, I figured we'd go over something about the labor shortage and just kind of jobs and applying and all that kind of stuff. Because as you can see, the article that I have queued up here from Business Insider says that a worker in Florida applied to 60 entry-level jobs in September and got one interview. Now, this article is a little older, obviously, talking about back in September, and it was written here or posted at least on October 19th. So I've been hearing a lot about this article. I have actually not read this article yet, but I've heard a lot of people talk about this article, specifically from the one here from Business Insider. There's been a bunch of other people that have done videos on it and everything, talking about this sort of like the sort of job shortage that's going on currently here in the U.S. Or not job shortage, worker shortage, right? Is what it's very important. There's lots of jobs, not for many people who want them, or a lot of these businesses are having trouble finding people. So what I wanted to do, because this is something I usually don't do. So usually with these, I do actually read the articles ahead of time, so I know that they're good information, and I kind of know what I'm talking about, and I can actually sort of like rehearse going through it. But for this one, I figured I would do something a little different. I would actually go through this one blind. I haven't read this article yet. I've seen maybe one or two videos about it, but they didn't really dive into it as much. And that was where I think the failing was of those other videos, because plenty of people, like I said, plenty of people have talked about this, but they haven't really read through the whole article, and they don't really give they don't talk about this particular person's situation. They just kind of talk about like jobs in general, which I think is great, except that doesn't really talk about this particular issue, which is the job shortage, or not job shortage, worker shortage. So let's go through it. We're going to read it. I'll give opinions analysis as I usually do, and hopefully we can find out a little bit more information and get a little bit more in the mind of this particular Florida worker, and see if we can figure out exactly what happened, of why he applied to 60 jobs that supposedly are entry level, okay, and never got an interview. Just got one. So, brief overview here. Businesses across the US say they are struggling to find employees, especially for hourly work. Okay, hourly work being not salaried, working where you get paid for each hour that you work. So you work for 4 hours, you get paid 4 hours of work, right? Joey Holtz decided to test their claims, submitting 2 applications a day in September. Yeah, that makes sense. 2 a day, sure. Holtz got one interview, and his summary of the experience went viral on multiple platforms. Of course, it went viral. So let's see what it starts. So Joey Holtz recalled first hearing complaints about a labor shortage last year when he called to donate convalescent plasma at a clinic near Fort Myers, Florida. Okay. The guy, quote, the guy went on this rant about how he can't find help and he can't keep anybody in his medical facility because they all quit over the stimulus checks. Okay. Holtz told Insider, and I'm like, your medical professionals quit over $1,200 checks? That's weird. Yeah, I would question that heavily. So this complaint said that, oh, I can't find any help. Everyone's quitting because they got these stimulus checks. Except we got $1,200. We got 2 of them. Okay, I believe it was 2. They were pretty spread apart. It wasn't like you got one right after the other. And I know like there were extra benefits you got from being on unemployment. And perhaps, okay, now if it was the case, because again, this doesn't really go into it, so now here's the case, right? So the case could be that if you were getting the stimulus checks plus the bonus for unemployment, which was pretty good from what I understand, and if at this particular clinic, they were paying less than that, like the hourly rates at the clinic were less money than you would make just being on unemployment because we were getting the bonus to it and everything, I could see that being the case. And that would not be weird. That would be like, well, yeah, of course, if they're paying you less, why not just take the unemployment in that case, right? I think a lot of people said that. And now you would think, oh, well, isn't having a job better than not having a job? Sure, it is. But think of it this case. If they're medical professionals working at a clinic already, even if they just ride out the unemployment, because I know a lot of states, a lot of areas, the unemployment has ended or the bonuses have ended for it, or the extra bit that you were getting. So I know a lot of people don't have that anymore. But if you work in the medical field, chances are it's going to be pretty easy for you to find a job, right? You'd have a very easily marketable skill that you can use. So chances are you're not going to be struggling to find work afterwards. So yeah, if you don't like the pay you're getting, perhaps don't like the job, yeah, it made sense to quit in a lot of these places because you're like, hey, I don't want to be around coronavirus. I don't want to be around to do that. Don't want to deal with it. Don't have to. So this is there's a lot more you put in here and a lot more maybe speculation, or at least get a little bit more detail. So this is the only part so far, a little suspect. Not sure just over the $12 checks. This is not the case. This is what I think a lot of people miss. See, this is something I didn't know, right? This part, this is why it's important to read the article, okay? A lot of the people, or at least a couple of people that I saw talking about this specific article and the specific guy, only ever said something about the checks. It never mentioned, by the way, everyone was getting way more money on unemployment than they had been, right? We were getting the bonus. There was bonuses for, like, I guess you call it bonus, but it was like an extra stipend you would get because of being out of work during the coronavirus. Now, yes, now those have ended, right? Okay, but this article was written back in October, so people were still getting those, right? So, yeah, that's the part that they leave out. Obviously, yes, like that makes it less weird if you consider all of the extra money that people were getting because of being on unemployment during the coronavirus. Anyway, let's continue. Over the next several months, the 37-year-old watched as a growing chorus of businesses said they couldn't find anyone to hire because of government stimulus money. Okay, it was so ubiquitous that he joined a No One Wants to Work Facebook group where users made memes deriding frustrated employers. Yeah, fair enough. There are a lot of these jokes. I did see a lot of these. And it usually involved like really low wages, right? Like the wages were really low, or the jobs were kind of crappy, and people were like, "Oh, nobody wants to work." Well, because it's like these jobs suck. These aren't good. And again, getting this goes in a little bit more detail. Okay, government stimulus money, yes, because everyone was getting this extra added bit on top of unemployment, your regular unemployment plus this extra bit. A lot of people I know, some people I know, and a lot of people I've heard of, did decide just to not work during the pandemic. They said, you know what, I don't want to risk getting sick because last year when we didn't have, or previously, like last year, I guess the end of last year, we started giving the vaccine out, but the vaccine wasn't widely available until more recently. So like say last year when a lot of people weren't vaccinated yet, and we were just doing social distancing and masks and stuff, like if you didn't have to work or before the vaccine was there, why, I've known a couple of people who decide, hey, I just don't want to work with risk of getting sick or whatever, because some places, at least in the beginning, some businesses were very, very slow to adopt the different precautions. I know depending on where you lived, some places there were mask mandates, some where there weren't. I know a lot of businesses were providing masks and stuff for their employees, but weren't requiring them or anything for customers. Some businesses, in fact, one particular I know of, they didn't provide masks, nothing, didn't really seem to have any sort of plan in place for it. So yeah, obviously people are going to quit those jobs because why risk getting sick when you don't have to? And you're getting this, there's this extra incentive. I know the people, at least I know, that left their job made more money being on unemployment than they did at the places they were working. So why would you work, right? If you're given this opportunity where it's like, hey, by the way, you don't have to work, save a ton of money because you're not driving to work every day, you're not paying for public transit to get to work every day or whatever, and you can stack all this extra money, and now you can do things. I know a lot of people during the pandemic started investing and all sorts of stuff because they were home, they were bored, they needed something to do, and they had extra money that they didn't have before. So I can understand why a lot of these people decide not to work anymore. And I can understand why a lot of, say, service industry jobs may have had trouble finding people to replace folks that they lost. But let's read on. So he said he found it hard to believe that government money was keeping people out of the labor force, especially when the end of expanded federal unemployment benefits did not seem to trigger a surge in employment. So, yeah, all expanded benefits ended in September, but 26 states, including Florida, ended them early in June and July. That's right. Some states ended them much earlier. Other states and everyone else ended in September. So only recently, a couple months ago, it ended. But yeah, so the extra money people were making had stopped. But beforehand, yes, obviously it was going on. So this guy is saying it's hard to believe that you would choose not to work when you run out of these benefits. Well, things take time, right? Obviously, if they run out in September and you start applying for jobs and stuff in October, by the time these companies actually get around to like looking at stuff and sorting through applications or whatever, it could be October or later. It seems reasonable. It's like a reasonable like time frame there. So here we go. He says, if this extra money that everyone's supposedly living off of stopped in June and it's now September, obviously that's not what's stopping them, he said. Workers have said companies struggling to hire aren't offering competitive pay and benefits. That's true. They may not. There are plenty of these companies and plenty of these businesses that were offering much lower wages that people were really just not interested in making anymore. And benefits. Benefits are really, really important, especially during the time of like a pandemic. Everyone is sitting there thinking about health insurance, thinking about these benefits. Like, hey, if I get sick and I'm out for 2 weeks, I gotta make sure I'm taken care of. So yeah, it makes sense. So Holtz, a former food service worker and charter boat crewman, decided to run an experiment. On September 1, he sent job applications to a pair of restaurants that had been particularly public about their staffing challenges. And then he widened the test and spent the remainder of the month applying to jobs, mostly at employers vocal about the lack of workers, and tracking his journey in a spreadsheet. Okay, so he's saying he's focusing it on employers who were vocal and say, "Oh my God, we have no people. We have no people." Okay. 2 weeks and 28 applications later, he just had 9 email responses, 1 follow-up phone call, and 1 interview with a construction company that advertised a full-time job focused on-site cleanup, paying $10 an hour. Okay, but Holtz said the construction company instead tried to offer Florida's minimum wage of $8.65 to start, even though the wage was scheduled to increase to $10 an hour on September 30th. He added that it wanted full-time availability while scheduling only part-time until Holtz gained seniority. Now, I have heard of this before. I have heard of jobs, specifically jobs in labor, like construction or whatever, that will advertise $10 an hour because they want to get everybody who wants $10 an hour in. Then when you get there, they say, okay, by the way, it starts at $8.65. You're going to be here a little bit longer, and then we're going to eventually raise it to $10 an hour. And he clearly said, by the way, September 30th. Now, the issue with scheduling, obviously saying that we need full-time availability because we might schedule you at random times, but we're only going to schedule up to a certain number of hours. So that's a bit of a bamboozle there. I could see being pretty upset by a job being that disingenuous of only offering you part-time hours. Now, well, you got to gain seniority. It's like, well, what are the parameters for seniority? How long do I have to be here until I start getting those full-time hours? So let's see. Now, Holtz said he wasn't applying for any roles he didn't qualify for. Okay, so boat crewman and restaurant, food service workers. So, okay, we know what his experience is. He wasn't a programmer or an engineer or anything of the sort. Okay. Some jobs wanted a high school diploma, he said. Some wanted retail experience, he added. Most of them either said willing to train or minimum experience, and none of them were over $12 an hour. Okay, $12, that's still pretty low. $12 is really, really low. And everyone, wants high school diploma, it's retail experience, whatever, very basic stuff. Now, again, he claims that he didn't apply for anything that required a degree. I didn't apply for anything that said must have 6 months experience in this thing. Okay, so again, that is so we're gotta take his word for it, but for the sake of arguments, we'll say that, he applied to those jobs and kept it within those parameters. Holtz isn't alone. Others have also spoken out about their troubles finding work, despite the seemingly tight labor market. In a Facebook post on September 29th, which went viral on Twitter and Reddit as well, Holtz said 58 applications, says, y'all aren't desperate for workers, you just miss your slaves. That's very charged, but okay. My opinion is that this is a familiar story to many, he added. By the end of September, Holtz had sent out 60 applications, received 16 emails, 4 follow-up phone calls, and 1 solitary interview. He shared a pie chart showing his results. Okay, well, thing is, it's like most of them no reply. Yeah, of course. That's kind of how we're going to assume, right? And then most send email because email's the easiest. Phone call, weird. Who phone calls anymore? And obviously only got the 1 interview. Let's see. Holtz acknowledged that his results may not be representative of the larger labor challenges in the country, since his search was local and targeted the most vocal critics of stimulus spending. Let's pause that. He added that despite the claims of some businesses struggling to hire, his boss had no staffing issues during the pandemic. Okay, nobody leaves these positions because he takes care of his people, referring to his boss. Okay, so that's why, and that is the end of the article. Okay, so a few things. He focused on ones who were most vocal about the stimulus checks and whatever. It depends on the types of jobs he applied for, right? We don't know. He just focused on things that say only high school diploma and retail experience, whatever. So let's be a little charitable, or we'll be good faith and charitable to him to say that he was honest and kept all of his, kept it to the parameters and did actually apply for these genuinely entry-level jobs that he was, as he said, qualified for. Who are going to be uncharitable to or bad faith to are the jobs he applied for, the employers. So looking at this individual, we already know a few things about him. So he's 37, so not super young, not super old, but right, I'd say right in the middle. Okay. Already had experience as a food service worker and a charter boat crewman. So, okay, food service worker, he could have been a line cook, your base level, could have been a chef. Didn't say chef, he probably would have said chef, but if he was, but could have been anything in food service, could have been a server, a host, management, any of these things, right? We don't know. We'll assume that since he's keeping it low entry level, that he's talking about like servers, maybe a bartender or something of that sort. Okay, so jobs that like being a server, yeah, you might want to find someone who's experienced, but at the same time, you could take anybody off the street and teach them how to be a server. You don't have to actually have any sort of like genuine talent, right? Now, charter boat crewman, that's a little bit different. Okay, so depending on the size of the boat, how long the trips are, what kinds of waters the trips are going through, right? If these are just little local trips around the bay or whatever, you might not need that much. The water might not get that choppy or that intense, and you might not have that many situations that you're presented with. So your level of experience or talent in being a crew member of a boat might not need to be that crazy. Now, on the other hand, could work on, say, a fishing boat. And maybe, because he said this is in Florida, maybe they go way off the coast out into the ocean, doing some maybe deeper sea fishing type stuff, whatever, where there may be some storms and everything. Like, you may have to have a lot more experience, may have to have be a lot more weathered, to say, about like knowing how to deal with different situations on a boat, depending on the size of the boat, right? A much larger boat would require a much more talented, much more skilled crew because you have a lot more to work with, right? A lot more rigging and different things that could possibly go wrong. So the guy, and again, being 37, the guy seems reasonably experienced in these fields, or could be reasonably experienced, right? A boat crewman, food service worker, all that kind of stuff. Seems like you would know, at least you would have a good bit of experience in the field, okay? So looking at the jobs that he was saying that he applied for, he was applying for these really low-level jobs, $10 an hour, $8.65, whatever, all this kind of stuff. So this is where I said we're going to be kind of bad faith and uncharitable to these employers, and we're gonna assume the worst for a minute with them. So if you're a construction company and you're looking for someone to do job site cleanup, right? That's nothing that's incredibly skilled or talented. Really, it's just you're there for hours a day, probably a long day, and you're probably moving heavy things, right? Worksite cleanup, so scrap woods, pieces of metal, whatever. I don't know, whatever you're going to be cleaning up, depending on what kind of construction they do, I guess. So you're probably going to be lifting things that are heavy, cumbersome, perhaps a little dangerous, maybe nails. There might be nails, broken saw blades. I don't know what there could be, anything, right? So yeah, you have that. But for the most part, there's not really any sort of education that you need or formal training. It's just, hey, pick this stuff up, toss it in the dumpster, right? Now, they did, so that sort of, that hoodwinking, if you will, of, offering, displaying one set and then reducing it and whatever, they're not looking that type of job, again, to be like uncharitable to them and assume the worst. They're probably looking to get bottom of the barrel, bare minimum, just a body to fill a spot because they need somebody to clean up and they want to pay them as little as humanly possible. And the promise of, it'll increase on the 30th, whatever, is probably just there to entice people to stay because the high turnaround is probably, they probably got high turnaround, right? So now let's think of other jobs, right? So other jobs, if you're applying to, say, food service industries and all sorts of other stuff, the issue then becomes, or the question I would have is there some sort of perhaps like covert discrimination that would go on here, right? At least that's what I would call it, right? We already know the guy's already 37, has a decent amount of experience from what it sounds like. So I would wonder, and I would question a lot of these employers if they see that. Now, I'm assuming he didn't put his age on his application or anything, but may have put like date of birth or something. But if the application specifically asked for it, depending on how he applied. But he's already 37, has a good bit of experience. There's plenty of employers who probably look at someone with their experience and choose not to even call them because they look at it and say, probably not interested in our job, probably going to ask for higher pay than what we want to pay them, right? Because even if they're being charitable, even if we're being exceptional, saying like, hey, maybe they were offering $12, $15 an hour, they're going to look at somebody who's already a little older, has a bunch of experience, and they're probably going to say, they're thinking to themselves, this guy's going to get this job, or we're going to going to interview him, and then he's going to ask for a huge raise. He's going to say, I want $20, $25 an hour, whatever, whatever the deal is, and they're not looking to pay that. Now, arguably, you could say, okay, well, they're just not paying high enough, but at the same time, they're also probably looking for someone younger, probably someone who has less experience who would be willing to take that lower amount. Now, yeah, is that shitty? Sure, they should be able to pay what people a good wage. But like one way I think that perhaps the experiment would be a little off, because these are jobs where typically, like, even though they're complaining about shortages, they're probably always going to have high turnover and shortages and stuff, because they do offer lower pay, not good hours, whatever, that type of thing. So that's definitely one of the things that I would consider for it. Now, the other thing we don't know is, he gives us his breakdown, but we don't know exactly what the application process was, because that's something I want to touch on, because the application process is another part of the puzzle here that could give us some insight into how it is. So there's a difference between, like, the old days, if you will, or back several years ago, where applications were paper. You got a paper job application, and basically it was you put like name, address, phone number, references, like right on a piece of paper, and it was a form that you filled out, right? And you would go to the place, and there'd be like a helpline sign out front, and you would say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can I get an application? And they would give you an application. You filled out right then and there. And then they'd call you if they needed you, whatever, that type of thing. That used to be the way a lot of these jobs were done, especially a lot of like retail and all sorts of other stuff where you showed up in person and said, hey, I'm looking for a job, whereas now, like 90%, maybe even more, maybe like 98% of jobs, you apply online. Like websites like Monster.com, LinkedIn, Indeed, I think is another one. There's a whole bunch of them, and they all have different ways of applying. Some of them let you apply right through their website. Like I know LinkedIn has like a quick apply option where like you can apply for the job right through LinkedIn. You don't have to go anywhere else. A lot of the other sites, though, they direct you to another website where that company does their hiring from. Like they post the job on, say, Monster, and then Monster links you to the company's website. That then links you to yet another website where that actually like does the hiring from, or is their application review process. Because a lot of places now, unfortunately, the way that, because we live in this very digital age, the applications are online. You don't necessarily talk to anyone or whatever. You fill out the application, and then an algorithm scans your application for keywords. They're looking for certain things. They're looking for certain experiences, little buzzwords, keywords, whatever that they're looking for to get you in there. So again, not knowing what his resume looked like, what kind of, if he changed or edited the resume to fit the job that he was specifically looking for, because I know that's something that can increase its visibility, and how he applied for them. Did he physically go in person to all these places, or did he apply online through like some mass employment process where, 10,000 people can fill out applications, and then a computer has to filter through all of them to spit out maybe one or two in order to figure out who the good candidates are. So that would help at least break this down a little further, because right now this is very, very basic information. And this was kind of all I was able to find on this. So I don't know if there's much more information than that. But again, like I said, I would, in order to really drive it home and really make this like a really, really good experiment and give us really good data, it would benefit to all 60 jobs what they were, maybe what they're called, maybe links to the postings or something, so we could see all of the spots. Also, follow up, okay? So it's December now. I would love a follow-up to see how many of those job postings are filled now or not filled. Because it would be really, really telling and really good to know if, say, half were already filled, half got filled in this time frame, or none of them got filled maybe, and that would be better information as well. So I think this is a pretty good article. I think there's a lot of good points that were brought up. But again, it would be nice to know who the actual jobs were, like what the places were. Not even necessarily, don't have to like blast the companies out, but like what was the description? What was the application process like? Anything that we can know to get a little bit more information about what the whole process was. Because if you're leaving up to, say, an algorithm, and perhaps post the resume or an excerpt from it or something, so we can see, well, how is the guy? Why does this keep playing? How is the guy applying? Right? How do we know that, okay, what was he, was he changing his resume based on the posting? Was it a mass online system that was just scanning resumes and his just didn't hit the algorithm and just got kicked out and he didn't get it that way? That'd be good. It would give us a better idea of it. And perhaps as a job seeker ourselves, maybe learn better ways of going about this application process, right? Better ways to change our resumes, fill out applications, that type of thing. What keywords to look for if we can say like, oh, hey, he did this and got nowhere, so now I know what not to do, right? Could have been that. But again, overall, a good article. I'm actually glad this guy did the research, did put in this little experiment, because it's definitely good information, good to know. So yeah, like I said, but overall would like some good information. So definitely let me know in the comments below what your application experience has been like, or if you know anyone who's done similar things. And yeah, be as specific as possible, because I think specifics always make it better. They always definitely let us know more. So anyway, hope you enjoyed. I will see you all in the next one.